Chapter 1141. Luffy. It's definitely not my problem at this time. I just gave you what you want. As for how he reacts with the lance outside, can you blame me? But this is really water, you can verify it. A moment. At this time, Gongyi just snorted, but didn't say a word. The facts were already in front of him. Megda actually wanted to justify at this time, and after finding that the matter could not be undone, Megda sighed. Dao didn't say anything, and quickly took the thing off his neck, which also surprised Gongyi. Quickly pushed back Bobo, who had just stuck his head out. If he could see this scene, he didn't expect this man's head to be disassembled at any time, but he didn't have to do it in front of so many people. And at the same time, it also surprised Gongyi. It seems that every body and head can be matched at will. As for the trace of sewing at the back, it should be just a hook that has been planned for a long time. Never imagined that things would turn out like this. This is your true face. I thought you were a good person. You talked to me so sarcastically every day, and even pretended to be alms and gave me water. Who would have thought that it was Sima Zhao's heart, and the water he gave was not the same? It's not easy to use. Because of this pampering, I lost a whole lot of land, and it was still a green place when I came here. Now that so many years have passed, I didn't expect it to become. It is even more desolate than before, and even a desert has no chance of recovery. I don't know what you usually need to eat, but for me, surviving for so many years means nothing. It's already a miracle, thanks to you. After hearing this, the corners of Megda's mouth rose a little, but she didn't realize that there was another meaning in his words, so she agreed directly. Gongyi laughed, and then Luffy made a scoffing sound. This can't help but make Megda have some anger, and was laughed at by the two sneak attackers. In fact, I let them know what it means to have no return. If you dare to come, don't think about leaving. You will definitely solve them completely by yourself. You can't do this by yourself. A little bit surprised. The person in front of him had to cultivate a unique martial art in the desert outside in the past few years. At least for himself, it was completely no problem. Could it be that there are some experts who teach him some special people? Otherwise he knows what is a weapon against himself, which means that the desert outside is actually a fatal blow. Otherwise he will not let him outside, shape those things. After all, no one would have thought about the large desert outside. After all, it was made by himself. How could it be possible? But at this time, Luffy threw a small bottle directly at Gongyi, which was filled with some sand, and then again threw it over. The other is some water. Of course there are more than one, but the recorded Megda also intercepted a lot, and smashed one with 1 foot. At this time, Megda felt the scorching heat of the soles of her feet, and then she realized what was the thing I sent. I quickly intercepted all the rest. But how can there be a person like Gongyi, who is a little bit faster to apply? Gongyi quickly intercepted more than half of the liquid and bottle he stepped on, and then called Bobo out from behind and quickly stuffed everything into his arms. Hold this thing, I'll call to throw it in a while. You can throw the liquid one and throw it too, and you can throw the sand one, and I'll smack and save Mayor. At this time, Luffy on the opposite side naturally understood what Gongyi meant, and the secret code between the two was very obvious, but Mayor's pupils shrank from Gongyi who suddenly appeared behind Luffy. Luffy dodge, someone is attacking from behind. Just as the words fell, Mayor's demon sword slashed straight down. The power of this demon sword is indeed very powerful to smash the ground into a hole, especially in Mayor's unconscious state. The unity of man and sword seems to have reached the realm of a Merlin. Only Meyer's swing was just an ordinary sword. At this time, Luffy narrowed his eyes. The current situation is actually the best way to deal with it. Meyer was actually controlled by Megda. It seems that what the man said is true. They are related by blood, and Meyer is reluctant to deal with Megda directly, but at the same time, if he does not deal with it, it means that the remaining people will die. Question: to choose between these, Gongyi doesn't know which one he will choose, and also Meyer may not know the reason. Chapter 1142. Choose, third. I didn't expect that the real machete still fell on your head. You decide for yourself, which one will be your companion on the next journey. If you choose Luffy, he can help you make everyone save it, but if you choose Mayor, the rest will die here, because I don't know if Mayor will kill you directly under my control." After hearing this, Gong Yi's eyes condensed for a while, but judging from the situation in front of him, it was the most correct choice to stand still. Magda said this. I don't know if she was testing herself or giving herself a warning. But he is definitely not sure what will happen next. It is possible that Mayor will use the great power of friendship between several people to overcome the mind controlled by this man, but now he can only pin his hopes on him. Well, if you want to rely on yourself, it is definitely not possible. Neither side felt that it was very good. I could choose Luffy first, and then slowly bring Mayor out. After all, the plan had already been made, but I was afraid that the other party would not even wait for that moment. Anyway, today you will all be made into specimens by me. Why do you have to run away? You may be able to give you a good time if you are obedient. What do you think? After hearing this, Gong Yi was so angry that he finally rescued his brothers, but this person said something like this to himself, and he didn't take his heart at all. For the last time, no matter what you leave in this place, even if you leave me in this place, these brothers must leave. If you want to make specimens, you can find other people, but in this case after the incident, I don't know if you still have life. If you can live to that time, if you dare to attack them, you must make all the preparations. After hearing this, Magda, who was on the opposite side, couldn't help but burst into laughter, thinking that he would say something, but he didn't expect to threaten himself with this. If I said I was afraid, it would have been impossible to collect samples in this place. It is precisely because I am not afraid of anything, let alone the conditions, he said, that I collected the specimens of Mayer's father. I did not expect this mask pretty useful. Since having her, I no longer know that I have broken 5 or more people. I have made specimens of them all and placed them in my cabinet. This sense of accomplishment is not an ordinary thing. If Gong Yi knew that he had such an idea and called Mayor out, Luffy next to him greeted him and quickly began to cooperate. It has to be said that the movements between the two are sensitive, one of them holding a sword, and the other waving a rubber arm, and even entangled Magda for a while and couldn't be separated. This was a good opportunity. Gong Yi seized the opportunity and ran directly to Luffy's side, leaving Bobo behind and instructing him specially. Don't forget, as long as he comes over, you will throw this one by one on his face. Remember to remove the plug first, otherwise it will be useless at that time. Don't be in a hurry, one by one people have time, and every time you throw one, his footsteps will stop for a while, long enough for you to open the second bottle. With Gong Yi's footsteps moving, he also arrived at Mayer's side. At this time, Mayer's eyes were gray and white, and he must have been controlled by someone. It's like being blind, but at this time, I don't have so many thoughts, and I have to deal with this hurdle in front of me first. His gray-white eyes made Gong Yi's heart twitch involuntarily. For him, it was like purgatory. Friends who used to fight side by side, relying on each other for so long, finally turned into this look. I'm afraid anyone would feel distressed. After Gong Yi saw what he looked like, he kept calling out Mayer's name, and then took out a small bottle from the side. The bottle was filled with the outside sand and dust. If you guessed correctly, this thing is broken. On his body, it should be able to remove those so-called evil spirits. After all, he has no idea what Magda used to control Mayer. But it has to be tried anyway. Maybe some breakthrough points can be found, and at this time, Mayer suddenly resisted, and even pulled out his demon sword and aimed at Gong Yi. At this moment Gong Yi was completely stunned. He didn't expect that this sword would eventually point at him. But there was a little more struggle in the eyes of the other party. It seems that Mayer's soul is still thinking about whether to do it or not, but the sword in his hand is always faster than he thinks, and it slashes directly at Gong Yi. Chapter 1143, Battle. Let Gong Yi himself have no chance to dodge, so he had no choice but to face the opponent directly. At this time, although the sword in Mayer's hand seemed to be slashing at him in a random manner, Gong Yi actually knew best in his heart. The set of swordsmanship was handed over to her by himself. If you guessed correctly, This time he was going to take his own life. It seems that sometimes it is. I am careless. I can't just teach the Nirvana skills to others, but he was only his own at that time. A crew member, in order to save his life, had to do this himself, but who could have imagined that so many other complex events would happen? Wake up, Mayor. At this time, Mayor could not receive the signal from the outside world at all. No matter how much he shouted, it was of no use. However, in the next second, something was suddenly thrown at Gong Yi's feet. At this time, he jumped up to avoid this attack. But when I looked closely, I found out that Luffy was lying under his feet, with a painful look on his face. It was natural to see that she should have been attacked. Now that he can't even protect himself, how can he with him? He simply helped Luffy up and looked at Megda in front of him. If there is any problem, we can just solve it, why bother? Before we just wanted to get Mayor back, you not only refused to give it, but you even treated us like this. You should have violated the law. I think I don't know this, but you should be most aware that someone will punish you after a while. Heavenly Path has its own reincarnation. Although I don't know if I can deter Megda by saying this, but finding a backer is one thing, and grasping a glimmer of hope must also solve the immediate problem, and at the same time, for Gong Yi, the planet is a very tricky as a character. I shouldn't be able to cope with him in a short period of time. But the group behind Bobo and Aruma didn't come, which made Gong Yi a little relieved. It was better than the whole army being wiped out. They survived in this place. I don't know if they can escape, but there are one is one, and they are left behind. When Megda is gone, Bobo can lead them tentatively out of this place. After all, by that time, Aluma had already woken up. At this time, Luffy was so sore that he couldn't stand up at all. All his hope could only be pinned on Gong Yi alone. Gong Yi pulled himself out gently, raised the long knife that was kept in between, and wiped it clean with the clothes. This knife has always been with him for a long time. It can be said that he helped to face many disasters and problems. Now that he has Lan Ying, he rarely uses it anymore. But when I really touched it, the boiling factor in the blood would still not be able to calm down for a while. After seeing this knife, I squinted my eyes when practicing medicine. I don't know what his behavior means. It might be a good thing in itself. Since he is always better than being unscrupulous, and at this time, Luffy can only rely on himself, which means that Gong Yi needs to face Mayor behind him and Megda in front of him. And for Megda to kill in one move, it's a two-way problem. No matter what you do, you can't make this perfect, but now you can only give it a shot. So without thinking about it, Gong Yi took this knife and rushed directly in front of Megda. After another on his body. Although this knife has not been used for a long time, it is still very sharp when it is actually operated. It should not be difficult to solve the trouble at hand. Then Gong Yi bounced off the ground and quickly jumped in front of Megda, chopped the stone in front of him into several pieces with his sword, and then kicked with his foot. All flew to Megda, and the opponent fell. Unequivocally, he grabbed one of the stones and crushed it, which made Gong Yi a little overwhelmed. If it is such a difference in strength, there is no way for him to defeat him, unless Luffy can stand up and fight with himself. And at the same time, Mayor is also slowly approaching behind him. His target seems to be Luffy next to him. Gong Yi has to divide his heart into two parts at once, and he has to make sure that every blow must be hit. Otherwise the problem will be themselves. Megda didn't resist too much at this time, she just accepted the opponent's attack ignorantly, as if she was planning something. Gong Yi just flashed a thought in her heart, but didn't do too much. Who knew that when he attacked for the second time, Megda would show his inhuman superiority? At least he couldn't do anything about him. Chapter 1144. Sober First. As Gong Yi quickly got down to Megda's approach, Megda actually stretched out her hand and pinched her leg, which made her struggle hard to think that the other party did something to her, but in fact she didn't. Megda just swayed, his legs grabbed, and then dragged Gong Yi down in his direction. Who knew that when she stretched out her left hand, it actually contained a stone fragment that had just been split open. The fragment is very sharp. If it was inserted into her body at this time, it might be damaged if it was not taken out in time. Die, and such a big one looks very small in his hand. But after all, he is the size of an ordinary person, how can he resist this blow? So at this moment Gong Yi made a lot of speculations in his mind. However, none of them were able to successfully avoid this, so they had to keep trying with a sword in their hands, hoping to chop the 10 yuan and 10 yuan into pieces, but unfortunately, the attempt is just an estimate, the real fact it was enough to make him feel that everything was in vain. The stone pierced into his leg like this, the pain felt very clearly even when Gong Yi recalled it a long time later. It was a very long wooden block, and it was so easy to join his leg. Ministry, even a person who is not usually afraid of pain, frowned at this moment, and licked Kiba. Why do you want to compete with me? Luffy is already unconscious at this time, and those people can't come over. Don't think that I don't know their whereabouts. Such a big fox is in front of me, unless it is blind. I didn't see that mayor is in my hands again. Who do you think can save your life? The blood dripping from the leg made Gong Yi feel at a loss, so he had no choice but to gently fix the wound. As for when the stone was pulled out, it was too late for him to care so much. And if the stone is pulled out quickly, it is possible that his own blood will spurt out directly, and his life will be lost by then. How can you predict what will happen next? But at this time, Mayor turned gray. Suddenly there was a dark struggle in his eyes, and no one noticed this. After all, he was still holding the demon sword as usual, standing aside, bowing his head and saying nothing. The image of being controlled. But no one expected that he was ready for a sneak attack, just now. The blood accidentally splashed on his face. The feeling of this liquid touching, let Mizi's soul return to the body within, and no longer under the control of Megda. At this time, Megda raised her hand and planned to strike Gong Yi one last time. Who would have thought that at this moment, a sword suddenly flew out from the side, hit the hand directly, and then pinned him to the wall. This kind of name, ordinary people's arm strength, no one can do except Mayor. So Gong Yi quickly got up and looked to the side, and found that it was indeed Mayor who woke up behind him. At this time, Megda's most of the faces have some unbelievable belief expressions. How can I wake up? My control technique has never failed. Why is it impossible that if you have such a friendship, you might wake up too? As for you taking my father's face, I haven't settled the account with you yet. Do you want to open it again? If you guessed correctly, these heads are just like a pendant to you, and what really matters is the place that is sewn on. After hearing this, Megda was completely stunned, unable to hide the surprised expression on his face. Maybe he didn't think that this ordinary child could actually figure out where his weakness was, the corner of Meyer's mouth. It went up a bit, making sure that I didn't say where I knew it from. From the first time I saw him, I felt that the sewing skills in that place were somewhat familiar. If I remember correctly, it should have been sneaked into the library when I was a child, and I saw the record in a book. There are such sewing marks. They are all town monsters. Who would have thought that sometimes the power within the clan is not strong enough to be attacked by this guardian beast, and it seems that this is the case with his own clan, so Meyer wrote it down in desperation. Then be careful not to look him in the eyes, and don't help the water he handed over, but his face is too confusing, and he has made up for the lack of family love for so long. Even if the poison is willing to drink it. But I didn't expect that this bowl of poison would cause so much damage to Gong Yi. The big hole in his leg should be bad for a while, and he must be rescued from this place before his blood dries up. So Mayer didn't grind any further. Chapter 1145, The whole army is destroyed, second more. And at the same time, at the moment when Mayer stretched out his hand, the demon sword flew directly from a distance. This is a potential that can only be stimulated after the real human and sword are unified. It can be said that at this moment, everything shocked Gong Yi, but seeing his real brothers rising up, the joy in his heart was hard to hide for a while. At this time, there was a scheming eye, and he quickly clenched his fists, as if he was accumulating strength, but between the lightning and flint, Mayer rushed up with the demon sword. A knife slashed at his head, only a loud noise was heard, and there was also the sound of some falling stones, so he was cut in pieces, and then fell to the ground, maybe even himself at this moment. I didn't think of it. Of course, everyone present had an unbelievable expression. Who would have thought that things would develop to this level today? But for Gong Yi, this is undoubtedly the best choice. After all, if Mayor can't wake up from the current situation, I am afraid the whole army will be wiped out. At this time, Aruma also slowly woke up, hugged Lan Ying, and walked out from behind the small rock. This is Bobo leading the two people to the place where they fought before. However, he found that several people had fallen into the cave on the side. After thinking for a while, Bobo turned into a fox and took the two of them down. Lan Ying was still awake. I don't know why, Ma intends to take him to ask Megda. Apart from that man, no one should know why he was in a coma and still not awake, and at the same time not saying anything else. This Megda is really vicious enough. After waking up, Aruma returned to the original that. Inside the pool, I smelled the smell lightly, and found that most of the smells in it were things that make people lose their minds and never wake up. It can be said that as long as this person is immersed in it for a long time, he will be Magda's puppet, and there will be no any resistance action, which is also something that keeps me haunted. I didn't expect him to be such a pervert, and other people's sober minds would not be spared. Of course, if his wife knew about it, he would definitely feel a few words, but at this time Bobo followed Ma's direction, but waited until the two reached the bottom. But found that the place was like a disaster scene. All the rocks in this place are covered with strips one after another, and all kinds of small pieces of rock are scattered on the ground. It is like a square that has been destroyed by a storm. At this time, Aruma is a little stunned. Stepped forward and touched these small stones. If these were made by Megda, I would still believe it. And if it was because of such a situation, then his companions would not have survived much. So at this moment, the expression on Aruma's face was a little sad, but Bobo suddenly patted him on the body. Look at the light coming from this end. Does it prove that he is still alive? After hearing this, Aruma's eyes lit up and ran in that direction. At the same time, he had already taken off the head of the battle between Mayor and Megda and put it aside, saying that he didn't want to destroy his souvenirs. Whether it's your souvenir or not, as long as I beat you, I have to take her away. It's obviously someone else's thing, but you have to keep it for yourself. They never seen someone as crazy as you. No wonder you only it's not because you're not gregarious that you can survive alone in this cave. After hearing this, Megda seemed to have been stabbed in a sore spot, and suddenly shouted. Her eyes turned bloody yuhi color. I have to say that at this moment, if a conscious person, if people see it, they certainly will. But at this time, Gong Yi was completely unable to think rationally because his leg was stuck in a huge rock, and Luffy left because of Megda's one-shot death and fell directly to the ground. You are the only one now. Is it appropriate for you to speak like this? If I make a move, you will die under my hands, and when I controlled you, I deliberately placed a similar ancient city in your body. As long as I can find that maternal body, you will not be far from death. After hearing this, Mayor was stunned for a moment. It turned out that the mother body of this GU worm still needs to be found. I thought that Megda would be with me all the time, so it seemed a lot easier. When Aruma and Bobo arrived, they happened to hear this sentence, and Aruma turned around and asked Bobo to find the project, but he didn't know what it was, so he simply followed a bottle to find it. Let's do it. Chapter 1146. Bottle. But Aruma in the world doesn't know that there are many bottles belonging to Megda in this place, and it can even be said that there are countless bottles, so when Bobo went to look for it, the whole person was dumbfounded. It would be better to know earlier. I went to rescue Mayor by myself just now, and let Aruma come over to find the bottle. This is the beginning of a nightmare. Of course, in the process of looking for the bottle, I also found a lot of strange things. There are some very large bottles in the corner, with some liquids in them, and then occasionally there will be the selected creature appears, not knowing what it is. So Bobo took a closer look and found that it turned out to be a living experimental specimen, but coincidentally there was only one sentence that the body had no head. At this time, Bobo remembered that there was a line connecting the man's head and neck. Is it necessary to sew up the thread every time you replace one, and the body cannot be thrown away, so it is stored in this place? But also after I accidentally bumped into a mechanism on the center console, I didn't expect that. The door behind me suddenly opened, and it was full of such bodies, without heads, but it was intact, and they can move freely. When the sound of their own footsteps reached their ears, those first started waving to arrest them, but Shi Yanping, who was so tall, wouldn't be able to climb out for a while. Maybe that's what they usually do to Megda. Well, but this time Bobo doesn't know how to save them. And in the process of moving, they always reach for themselves with their hands, which makes them feel very flustered. So in desperation, Bobo had to find what he needed first, but he didn't find that. So-called the mushrooms seem to have disappeared out of thin air. If so, when will Mayer really wake up and Luffy is in a coma, but he has accidentally touched a test object, that the thing quickly fell to the ground, and then accidentally hit an experimental box, at which time a body inside suddenly became quiet, as if it had been restarted or shut down. After a while, when Bobo came over, he could only see that the body in the jar disappeared, and he didn't know where he went, which made Bobo back, and then he appeared behind him at this time. Are you going to give yourself a fatal blow? If that's the case, then it's true, and I definitely can't resist, and I can't change this thing. But the moment he turned around, he found that person. The headless corpse was beside him, but unfortunately he didn't come to blackmail him, but to find the bottle with the Mother Gu, and one knee kneeling on the ground and offering the bottle with both hands. It was like listening to my own order. Then Bobo used his own thoughts to think of some other things. This body can help him find it quickly, so Bobo rolled his eyes. If all the bodies are put on this medicine, can he form a new one? Small army to deal with Megda. But he didn't dare to experiment too much. He just sprinkled 555 bottles on the remaining 444 bodies. As expected, they would move according to their own thoughts, and they had to say that they did. It's not the same frequency, there are 5 different behaviors. Go and seek revenge for Megda. After hearing Megda's name, I don't know if it was Bobo's delusion or what. Those bodies suddenly stiffened in that place, and then he strode out. At this time, Bobo thought it was himself. I saw it wrong, so I didn't take it to heart, but I didn't know until I arrived at that place that everything just now was just my self-comfort. Because they saw the march one by one, the light in their eyes was not deceiving at all. It was an angry little lamp after another. After seeing them coming, Megda's face also showed a trace pale white, and then looked at Bobo, who did not expect this little fox to let them out. Did you know that after a while everyone is going to die here, and there's no way to get them out unless you can take them apart, and even if you take them apart and put them back together, do you know this thing? How much resilience can I deal with? But don't you think all the people in this cave will die? At this time, Bobo tilted his head and looked at Megda in front of him. He didn't do anything wrong or was afraid of ghosts knocking on the door. He didn't pay attention to cover up these. The reason for the body was because they were too destructive, or because they just put it will only target him alone, and he only controls 555 of them, so there will be no problem at all. Chapter 1147. Mother Gu. There is a Mother Gu in this bottle, Mayer, take it quickly. Then let a body next to him walk over and give the bottle to Meyer, who is on the opposite side. At this time, Meyer opened the bottle and quickly put it under his nose, tempting the Gu worm inside the body, and he couldn't get it out. Not to mention this one is quite big. It can be said that it occupies the nerves of people, otherwise how could it be suddenly controlled without any thoughts? That kind of dementia scene is probably not something normal people can do. At this time, Megda's face was pale, watching these things keep approaching him, and he kept retreating. The war of the 666 headless people started at once, although his body was relatively large, but it couldn't resist the frenzied bombardment of the remaining 5 people. With the screams after another, even Bobo couldn't bear to see Megda's day, but he didn't order to withdraw. Today is either he died or I died. If these people can't escape successfully, half of them will die. The blame is all on him. If it wasn't for him being vacated, none of this would have happened to everyone. And for Bobo, the most important thing is that Aruma and Gongyi were hurt by him. At this time, Bobo lowered his head and noticed that Gongyi's body was plunged into such a long rock. At that time, he never looked at Meyer on the side, and the other party was always there, patiently tempting the bones in his body, but he didn't have time to take care of himself. At this time, Aruma didn't know why, just lay quietly on the rock next to him, with his head down, like these little things, but when Bobo walked back and raised his head, it was found that blood was still flowing on the other side's forehead. You will regret it. What happened? I fell into a coma and woke up like this. At this time, Luffy got up from the ground. Just now, seeing that Megda had completely lost his heartbeat, he was torn apart by the 555 headless bodies, as if it was not surprising. The other party just asked what happened, but did not notice why there are 666 headless bodies lying in this place. At this time, Bobo suddenly remembered that this Luffy is the god of the desert alone, although he asked whether this name can also save people, so he quickly pulled him up and brought him in front of people. The Gu worm in Yi's body has already poured out again, so there is no fear of life. Gongyi on the side had a pale color on his face because of the blood, while Aruma on the side was only slightly injured. Although he hit his forehead, there was not much blood flowing out, but why was he still in a coma? I didn't wake up. At this time, Luffy stepped forward and lightly looked at Gongyi's wound. His injuries are serious and must be removed before they can be successfully treated. This is a healing powder, but you have to make a decision. If you stop the bleeding, the stone will not be removed, but if it doesn't stop bleeding, he may have died before he got there. After hearing this, Mayer was a little bit caught off guard. This can make him choose how to choose. Both sides have a non-best plan. Isn't there a third option? At this time, Luffy was silent. If you are reluctant, there is a third way, that is to use your blood to fill the vacancy in his body, but you must know that once the power absorbed by his side is too strong, you will die here directly. This is Mayer nodded. All the sins are caused by himself, and after a while, I have to return to the village on the other side to return to my life. I can't say that there were 5 people when I went, and there are only 4 people left after returning. What will those people think of themselves? Can they still entrust their lives to themselves, and wait for them to rescue themselves? And when they rushed over just now, Gongyi hit them in front of them. If he hadn't delayed the time, they would have already. He was killed by Megda, so the real thing has to have a cause and effect. He was so loyal to himself, and he couldn't live up to his heart. He simply nodded directly. Luffy saw him so happy, and said nothing more. I used something similar to a scale to measure 2 sizes on it. The same pillow was inserted directly into the bodies of 2 people, and there was no so-called infusion tube in the needle, but it could be seen. At this time, Meyer's face was slowly becoming pale, while Gongyi was filling up, gradually becoming a little more Yuhi, until after a while. Later, the blood in the 2 people's bodies did not know the balance. It's still okay after coming down, but Meyer felt that there was no blood draining from his body, and some people couldn't help but wonder and looked up at Luffy. Chapter 1148. Blood. Sure enough, it's a brother, because he unilaterally refused your blood transportation. You can also contribute to him again, but as long as he can't open that heart door, you can't transport blood. After hearing this, Meyer couldn't help but feel a little bit puzzled. Let's talk about the last day first. After Yuhiran returns your complexion to normal, I will directly withdraw from my absence and have any contact with you. You see how it is, and I will be on that side soon. Stabilize yours first. The situation, you can't let you get out of it in your life. When you are a lame captain, I don't want you to be like this, and you have to return to your life in a while, in order to make the villagers believe in my ability to save them. How do you say you should cooperate with me? After hearing this, I don't know if it was a reaction or what, Gongyi's fingers trembled slightly. Through a lot of blood loss, In fact, it is reasonable to say that a person should not have his own consciousness. But at this time, he moved his finger, which also made Luffy's face change slightly. It seems that this time things are not as simple as he thought, at least the brotherhood of the two of them seems to be beyond his budget. If this place is written in both directions, one person will be swallowed, and then become a zombie and lose all the blood in his heart. But the two of them are different. They support each other and replenish each other. Don't think that you can't see it. In fact, the flow of blood in their bodies is the most clear to you. He absorbed part of the blood from Mayer's body just now, and Gong Yi maybe after reaching the balance, he even returned some to him. Don't worry about it at this time. Since the needle is inserted into the body, if he really needs it, he will ask for it from you. Let's go outside first. After hearing this, Mayer didn't have time to hesitate, and nodded. The wound on Aruma's side was naturally treated very well, and there were very few blood vessels on the forehead, and the amount of bleeding was also very small. So he didn't need an infusion, but it didn't mean he didn't need a bandage either. After a piece of cloth was attached, Luffy waved his hand and let a few people leave. But at this time Bobo suddenly sounded. Lan Ying disappeared. This is Mayer's face. It became whiter. I seem to remember, when Lan Ying was here just now, she was so hot. Will things be different? After all, after breaking up Megda, the man was suddenly lost, but just when several people were like ants on a pot, when they were in a hurry, Lan Ying suddenly appeared in the cave. On the other end, and waving at them. I was frightened to death just now, and suddenly 555 headless people appeared in front of me. At first I thought they were sent by Megda's men, but they kept gesturing with me and gesturing to me. It was Bobo who called me here. They said it was a little fox, so I followed him forward. After all, staying in that place is basically dead. Who would have thought that I would have bumped into you? After hearing this, Mayer's eyes couldn't help but look at Bobo who was on the side. It was time to explain it. Luffy on the side was also curious. I didn't expect this kid to be able to control him. In the cave, nothing the corpse of the head, originally thought that only his fiendish man could decipher how to control these corpses. Actually, it's not that difficult. In the same place as his laboratory, there is a small test tube, which I accidentally smashed and then floated in the air. And some liquid spilled into that. The volumetric flask that contained them, and then as soon as I turned my head, the headless corpse in that jar was gone, and I was startled at first, for fear that it would come from somewhere. It popped out of a small gap. When talking about this, Bobo couldn't help swallowing. Maybe the situation at that time was really urgent. Mayer couldn't help but smile when he saw his appearance, and he was still as stupid as before. When I was in that small village, I felt that he was really a person without any scheming, willing to trust anyone. After all, there was a beam of light in the original cave, and he could completely abandon himself and escape, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to fight side by side with himself. Then, the corpse rushed towards me. I thought he was going to do something. Who would have thought that the other party knelt down on one knee and touched a small bottle with both hands, which contained the GU worms that induced Mayer's body. Bottle. After hearing this, Mayer couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. It turned out that his life-saving medicine was found by this headless corpse, and he was a little more grateful to look at them. At this time, they naturally couldn't observe it. But Mayer knew it in his heart, and the atmosphere suddenly condensed at this time. Chapter 1149. Manipulation. Then let's be serious, what are you going to do with them anyway? My base will never allow these headless corpses in, and they should be following you in a short period of time. Mines, after all you've controlled them with that reagent. After hearing this, Bobo was in a dilemma. He couldn't help but go, and things seem to be like this. They listen to their own words and can even think of what they are thinking. Sakura, they immediately sending people over. Is it a matter of thinking about sending all the people to Luffy? Can they do it too? But at this time, I thought about it, and there must be no movement in the headless corpse. At this time, Bobo only then did I realize that it was related to what they knew. They didn't know Luffy's residence, so it was impossible to operate at this moment, but it was still possible to have them carry Gong Yi on their backs. It is better for 4 people to carry a stretcher than for them to carry them. A lot more stable. Although it is said to be a so-called headless corpse, the stretcher is actually very stable, and a few people behind them can't catch up with their speed, but at the same time, Bobo has also discovered a secret. If this kind of thing can continue. If so, why didn't he teach this method to the person next to him? And the one that he smelled at the beginning. The potion seemed familiar. It should be one that he had used before, but he didn't expect the desert god to have this hobby. May I ask if you know what perfume-like stuff you put on it? Luffy was stunned for a moment, then laughed. No, this is also a kind of body fragrance. Bobo nodded clearly, with an expression of sudden realization. Then tell you the good news, you can control these headless corpses, the one you smelled in the laboratory. The perfume is the smell on your body. If you guessed correctly, this should be Megda, the source of the previous production. No wonder he will drive you out and let you enter this cave, I am afraid that you will escape with these headless corpses, but that thing is really like you, at least it is still in that laboratory. There are dozens of bottles, and if you don't believe it, go look for it there. After hearing this, Luffy stayed where he was. Why did he use the scent of his body? Did he want to blame himself? But now that he has arrived, he must first help Gong Yi to heal the wound on his body. At that time, he ordered a few headless corpses to carry people in. Indeed, as Bobo said, as long as he waved his hand, they would follow their movements step by step. At this time, Bobo couldn't help laughing. The 4 of them always want to leave this place, but Luffy at this time is different. He can live longer in this place, and if these headless corpses are cultivated, if it's good, you can talk, and then you don't have to think life is boring. So, a few people smiled and stood aside, and those headless corpses introduced them to the room where they should be staying. The environment of this place is still good, but unfortunately because the water in Megda was a little more expensive, causing this place to become a desert, but fortunately, Luffy later accumulated some rainwater, and successfully fed all the flowers and plants in the backyard. Not only does the food have a source, but there are even a few more greens in life. This is already the happiest thing. At least at this moment, Bobo can still understand some of Luffy's thoughts, after all, just like the village before him. In the same way, it doesn't matter how good their lives are, as long as everyone is alive, it is enough. It seems that the next step is to go back to see how they are doing, and they have never returned after being away for so long. But at this moment, a scream suddenly came from the room where Luffy was treating. Several people were a little curious. When they rushed to the door, they found that the headless corpses were helping to change the blood. A pot of water was brought out. At this time, Meyer's face was pale, and when he rolled up his sleeves, he found that the needle on his body had been pulled out. Wondered who the blood was drawn from. This was thinking of Luffy inside. It turned out that all the blood came from him. It seems that he had a plan from the beginning. The person responsible is not myself but Luffy, and I am willing to dedicate myself to it. But what he didn't know was that this was a kind of repayment to Bobo. After all, he taught himself how to control those headless corpses. This is also a deserved reward. What kind of blood is this? As long as you recover in this desert for a few days, you can replenish the rest of. But these headless corpses don't know what they usually eat, anyway. The blood has no interest at all. Chapter 1150, Offense, 3rd. If this is the case, then there will be a lot of manipulation at that time, but be aware that if you don't know what their food is, you may be offended in the future. But Megda's books didn't record this, and he didn't leave anything behind. The only thing of value was the ones on the ground. The bottles and jars, but what did each one have? It needs to wait until later attempts to confirm. But now Gong Yi's injury really did not let him think. He has been in a coma and refuses to wake up. He is also a little distressed. You must know that this is because of the injury to protect himself. Meyer saw that the blood water that was exchanged out of the pots after another was naturally very uneven in my heart. Lan Ying's trembling hands on the side hugged Bobo in her arms tightly. At this time, Bobo smelled a faint aroma, so he left along that place. The few people who were tangled at the door actually didn't realize that Bobo had left. You were the first to discover it when you realized it. The little cutie in Yin's arms has disappeared. That little fox has no flower shape. Where can he go? And it's around here. No one came to say hello just now. Who did he leave with? Isn't it still there just now? Are you holding her in your arms? Why did she disappear in a blink of an eye? Did someone carry her away? But don't you feel anything at all? After hearing this, Lan Ying was the first to be unbelievable. I can't believe it. I have always used his hands just now, and I still feel that. The weight never let go. The student wanted to wait until this thought came back. After that, Bobo disappeared without a trace. At this time, the frying pan started to fry outside, but the wound was still being treated in an orderly manner inside. The rock mass can be said to be very huge, and the sword that Gong Yi transformed into was very sharp, even the surrounding area. The places are cut flat. It's not easy to take it out by myself. I don't know where to start. He can be said to be completely fit in this place. If he walks from top to bottom, his mouth and flesh will be stretched even more. In that case, an unreasonable solution. But if you go back from the bottom to the top, let's not talk about that. The top is up, just relying on the bottom one, if you want to get it right. It's a difficult thing. In desperation, Luffy had to use his rubber hand to roll it into a thin foot and gently touch the shoulder of the place. Gong Yi kept screaming in pain because there was no numbness, but even if there is anesthesia at this time, it should be of no use. After all, it is a coma. But at the same time, the rock is still shaking up and down, like a living entity. At this moment, Luffy feels that there are still some difficulties. If he wants to continue in this form, it is very likely to reach. Then the rock will slowly break apart. After all, his own rubber may give him some impact, but the rubber has already delayed a part of it as much as possible, so the next thing is. It depends on his own fortune. If he is lucky enough, this thing will be in slowly. It came out of his body. But the premise is that it must be turned over, but now it will bleed continuously, and I don't dare to touch it too much, so I have to wait for the rubber to slowly wear it out, and wait until the rock is taken out. After coming out, there was a huge blood hole in his leg, and no one was allowed in at this time. Seeing this scene, even I was very angry. If they were to see it, they would inevitably rush over to kill the monster. Anyway, Magda was dying at this time, but she was still twitching. That's it. But I am also not sure if he has real death. Stick his head out from this one, and see those people. Help go back to that place to see if there is real death. At this time, several people looked at each other in dismay. You see me, I see you. No one wants to go back. Everyone wants to guard Gong Yi. Wait for the moment he comes out, take a sigh of relief, but you must know that if you can't successfully arrive within the specified time, if you do, then it is possible that a series of things will really happen at that time, and then you have nothing to do with yourself. Anyway, I have already put my advice on the top of my list, but there is also one point. It is beyond my budget. What's the use of these people staying here? Can be helpful. What are you guys doing standing here? Why don't you hurry up and help get something, those of them just now? Didn't you see the pots? Don't you know how to help now? The pestles are like wood. I don't know, I thought it wasn't your captain inside. Chapter 1151. After hearing this, a few people rushed in a hurry. When Lan Ying saw Gong Yi lying on the bed, the huge hole in her body, she couldn't help but collapsed and sat on the ground. Faye has already taken some gauze and wrapped it around 10 times, but you must know that the bleeding speed is much faster than that. Much faster. At this time, Mayor keenly found that there was no wound on Luffy's body, so that. Where was the needle placed? As if seeing his doubts, Luffy pointed to the pendant-like thing on the side. Some blood. Those. I just asked them to go back and get them. I thought you would see them, but who knew you were there, standing dumbfounded. Of blood stored in that place. It shouldn't be a problem to save him. Don't worry, it's not that kind of. The snow on Teacher Chen Yan is all fresh. In 2 days before you. After hearing this, Mayor couldn't help but frown. He didn't expect Megda to do so many evil things against her father's face, but after playing Gong Yi, she had to go back and deal with the people of the village, and are still waiting to rescue them. This is a headless corpse, and suddenly the one came down. The curtain came in, and he was holding something similar to a book in his hand. At this time, Luffy picked him up, flipped 2 pages at random, and threw it away. Gave it to Meyer next to him. Didn't you say before that your family is cursed? You can take a look. Maybe the contents of this book can save the people in your village. Although I don't know much about the situation, I think it should be inseparable from 1089. But for Mayor in front of him, there were some who were too timid to pick up this book, knowing that Gong Yi was injured because he wanted to save those people, and it was also because he wanted to save himself. On this road, he walked forward without hesitation. Originally, this matter did not need to involve him. Now he is unconscious, and even has so many wounds on his body. How did they explain to himself? And this time Lanying has already expressed her dissatisfaction with herself, and the captain could have gone down. All of you here are well aware of this. How could he not survive with such wisdom and high-end technology? Someone must have been dragging his feet behind him, but he also hated that one very much. The 2 comatose people can't wake up. As long as they are awake, it's fine to bring themselves up, but it was Gong Yi's blood splattered everywhere that dragged them out of that environment. Don't think about it too much. This book should always be yours. As long as you follow it, you can save them. It's not a bad deal, and I think Gong Yi should also want to see you there as such a change. After hearing this, Mayor hid in a small corner holding the book, not knowing what she was thinking. Lanying and Aruma looked at each other and patted Aruma over to comfort her. Brothers for so many years, it's not bad for a while, and if Gong Yi and Mayor hadn't come in to be themselves, I'm afraid Aruma and Lanying would have lost their minds in that mysterious liquid, and then turned into one. In the end, there are no bones. At least this matter has been clear from Megda's words, and I did not expect this to be the case. Don't think about it too much. Now that his wound has been bandaged, the next thing is, let's see when he wakes up, or you should go back and deal with that side first. Maybe they are already in a hurry. After all, it may be more important for them to leave their lives, and they are also villagers in your place, so you should really think about it, and they should be liberated after being imprisoned for such a long time. After hearing this, Mayor shook his head. This was an honor that Gong Yi had won. He had to wait for him to wake up before returning to that place, and the villagers had been waiting for so long, so it wasn't bad at all. A day or 2, let them wait for a while. If it wasn't to save them, how could Gong Yi become like this? Although they are relatives who cannot be kissed anymore, they must also understand that they are not casual people who can choose and choose, and they can only be hooked on everything, but their unscrupulous community makes them feel a little scared. Who should be responsible for any problems that arise in the future? But when the village chief talks about her father, the sadness on her face will not lie. She likes her father very much, and he loves him very much. Son, but unfortunately, I don't seem to do so much kindness to myself. Chapter 1152, The Words of the Village Chief. The only thing that Mayor is grateful to the village chief is, he said that he should let himself not save them. This may be the warmest sentence he has heard from his family who care about him for so many years. I don't know why at that moment, Mayor felt they fell like an abyss, but after thinking about it, they have been cursed for a long time, and they should be released by themselves. First of all, let Lanying accompany Luffy in this place to protect Gong Yi, while Mayor and Alma set out on a journey to liberate those people, and there is also Bobo, who originally did not need to go. But then I remembered that the village chief had specially warned himself when he left, that if he wanted to come back, he could find his destination with Bobo, and he still had something to say to Bobo. It seems that it should be related to the village that was saved before. That thing is indeed a little weird. A sculpture can carry the vitality of everyone, which has already surprised me enough. But Bobo has always been protecting those people, thinking that they are not monsters, just some poor ordinary people, and since this is the case, he has nothing to say. After all, these things are exactly what he imagined. Two extremes. What are you going to do after you go there for a while? Go straight to them or negotiate some conditions? I feel that Luffy lacks quite a lot of resources, otherwise we will meet them as a condition and ask to make up all those herbs, and then when we go back, we can just bring Gong Yi back. After hearing this, Aruma also nodded, which was not a bad decision, but now it seems that he also feels a little bit afraid, what to do if something unexpected happens. You must know that when I first saw the village chief, I didn't think he was a good person. At least when I saw him, I felt that something was very strange. It was like something deliberately planned, even looking at people. It's a bit sharp, so to say this is. It's been hidden in my heart that I can't get past it. But to be honest, let's be on guard first. I always feel that the people in that place don't have much good intentions. After I went to that place last time, Lan Ying reacted first and asked me to run aside to see that place. The environment is actually not as green as I imagined, but rather gloomy. After hearing this, Aruma became more aware, and she must have come out to be something that needs to be prevented. Since this is the case, there is no need for him to refuse. If there is any problem, just say it directly. But the current situation does make me a little scared. If the two of them fail in this place, then how will Lan Ying, Luffy and Gong Yi deal with it? It has not been confirmed whether Megda is dead. After all, his death the body was still twitching, but due to some other factors, they had to go back to Luffy for treatment, otherwise, it would be difficult to do it if the time dragged on. You can bring this jade pendant directly on your body when you go in for a while. I feel that they are quite repulsive to some of the environment in that place. There was no obstacle at all, although the village chief recognized my face only later. Because this time, I always feel that something is not right, like someone moved something in the dark, so I must take a precaution. Moreover, when the jade pendant was close to that place, it emitted some light, and at the same time, Bobo jumped from Aruma's arms, stepping on the ground in the direction that he was constantly looking for. Finally stopped in front of a fork in the road, and then squeaked twice. This is what Aruma and Mayor hurriedly used, and looked at such a closed passage. Are those people behind this? So Mayor stretched out his hand and touched the wall lightly, and found that this time it was not as easy as pushing it away last time, and suddenly understood, it was because why could not open this wall before, but Aru beside him when Ma touched the wall, suddenly, the wall collapsed. This is the same as my first encounter. Could it be that this wall has always been like that? Will it be opened by someone who has never touched it before? If there is a chance, if you want to return, you will have no strength, and this will prevent other members who are not from this place from invading. But it also proves one point. People who go out will not come back, so the reason why his father was killed by Megda, is it because of such a rule that he cannot find a suitable place in this cave, only then did Megda take away, and at this time, a hidden danger was buried in Meyer's heart. Chapter 1153, Open, 3rd. After they entered, those people quietly watched two people walking towards them on the water. Just like the first time, this was a bit of vigilance in Meyer's eyes. Enough to surprise him, but at this time the village chief just looked at him lovingly with a smile on his face. It's not easy to dismantle, but it also feels creepy. Don't you think his smile seems a little fake? I also think, and the English you speak is indeed correct, the atmosphere around it seems to be. It's not the same. Let's resist first after you come in. Maybe you can detect some other things. Anyway, this place is estimated nothing good. After the two looked at each other, Mayor stepped forward and talked to the village chief about his success, killing Megda, and intending to liberate them from this place. After a long smile, he led Mayor to a place similar to a cemetery. But Aruma was forbidden to enter, saying that it was the holy place of their family and that outsiders were not allowed to enter. Aruma had no choice but to wait for him outside. Who knows when he'd turn to that? the village chief suddenly turned into a man-eating monster. It was Mayor who shouted, "Aruma," who was going to rush over from that side, but found that the villagers who had intercepted him had slowly turned into monsters one after another. This scene made him feel a little bit creepy. The children who smiled kindly at you and greeted you just now also turned into monsters one after another. At this moment, Aruma flashed, remembering that Mayor seemed to be like before. The word curse was mentioned. "Mayor, are they cursed?" When he heard this, Mayor's side didn't make any reaction, which made Aruma sigh deeply, as if he also had such a mark on his arm. As expected, when he lowered his head, it can be said that his hand has turned into a claw, and his sanity is slowly deteriorating. At this time, the old village chief came from that, holding a young monster in his hand. It is not difficult to see that should be Mayor. It seems that the size of the monster's body has grown in this place for how long? Otherwise, how could such a child suddenly become a huge monster like a mountain? The village chief snapped his fingers, and Alusu fainted. When he woke up, he found himself and Mayor tied to two Jinchuriki column, and there was a pile of firewood for the oranges, not yet start burning. But at this time, when he opened his eyes, he found that the village chief was in front of him, and Mayor, who was beside him, slowly woke up. "I knew that you were not a good person. The reason why my father was killed was probably because of the rules you set. You are only allowed to leave and not to enter, unless you are a newcomer and bring another person in. It seems that you are doing it for yourself. There are so many new lives in the village, so why do you have to force others to bring in a new person?" Quote. At this time, the village chief just smiled, but there was a bit more in that smile, and Mayor did not dare to guess the coldness. At this time, Aruma found that the village chief had taken the torch in his hand, so he started to shout, "Hope they don't burn themselves." There were also some other secrets that they didn't know, so they said a small part about Megda, even a trivial point, and then the old village chief suddenly became interested. He handed the torch to the person next to him, then walked slowly to Aruma, pinched her chin, and made her look up. "If that's the case, why don't you tell me what kind of secret trick Megda has? If you can tell the truth, then I'll let you and Mayor go. But at the same time, Mayor must to stay. He is the only way to revive our place, and we are still waiting for his blood Matsuri to be reborn." After hearing this, Mayor's face suddenly turned pale. She never imagined that their purpose was her from the beginning, but she also advised her at the beginning that she would never return if she could. "When I came to this place, it must have been. At that time, I was suddenly moved. An empty cliff with no one behind him, so he summoned the devil's sword from his hand, gently rubbing the. If you can untangle this rope and defeat them before they get burned, it won't be a problem at all." Chapter 1154. Secret. I can tell you anything you want to hear about him. As long as I know, I can say that there is a group of headless corpses over there. People seem to have found them from your side. Don't you think there is a relationship between the two of you? Is there any deal? I think that part of the people looks very similar to you now. Is it because someone secretly sent them all out? Otherwise how could it be possible that two people would go in every 3 days? After hearing this, the expressions of the surrounding villagers changed, and they started talking about the village chief. I didn't expect him to send people in. No wonder a few people disappeared every 3 days in this village. Aruma realized what he had said. The shocking thing, did not expect this village chief to be so mad. In order to maintain the peace of the whole village, even his own peaceful life, he actually chose to take the people in the village. The villagers sent it out. "Don't talk anymore. Do you want to be sent out too? The reason why I do this is not for your safety. Do you want to be displaced every day?" After hearing this, the expressions on the faces of the surrounding villagers were different, and they didn't know what they were thinking, but at this moment, Mayor really didn't have any kindness at all. At this moment, I must be very angry. What Megda has exchanged for her life is these cowards' chances of survival. In exchange for them, they have perfunctory things that are perfunctory. Just let them. I never imagined it myself. If Megda could wake up and see these things, she would definitely feel hopeless. The comatose person in the cave does not deserve to have the name of her father. She plans to change all the names in front of the cave when she returns. Drop. No matter whose name it is, that monster is not eligible to have it. I really did not expect that the village chief you have been loyal to for such a long time is actually such a person. It seems that I am really disappointed for you, and also feel a little sad for Megda. From start to finish, it's just a scene dressed in him. If I were him, I should throw you out at this time. I have never seen you. Maddened people. Deep breath to adjust her mentality, Ma patted Lu Huan on the shoulder. She was not easily irritated at this time. Everyone was staring at this side. If they were in a good mood, they might even have the last hope. Give up. Hard to get this thing. I can't help but to save it. So at this moment, many people are shaken, and it can be seen from their eyes that it is normal for them to think, or at least pure. Trust me once, I won't deceive you, even if it's for the matter of Megda being my father. I will swear in this place that I will never deceive you. The village chief has concealed this fact long enough. If you want to continue to be a tortoise in this place, living in such a rainy place every day, forever dark, then I don't care. After hearing this, the village chief couldn't help but glared at Meyer fiercely, then turned his head to gather the villagers together, and slowly gave them ideological work, but at this moment, one of the villagers suddenly changed his mind. Inside stood up, as if the village chief's management in recent years had some injustices. Every time you tell us that you will take us out one day, but after this young man comes, you let us stay in this place for a while. What kind of evil do you hide? And it is not ugly come out, this place, some things have already been settled, we are destined to leave, why should you stop us as the village chief? It's not for your own good. If you say he is a bad person, and you look like this, you have to take off this layer of clothes before you can be discovered. Don't you think it's weird? At this time, Mayer couldn't help laughing beside him. It was the first time he heard someone say something similar to the past so justifiably. It was obviously the clothes that hid their figures, but it was the clothes that caused them. Their lives cannot go on normally. At this time, the village chief turned his head to look at Mayer, and seemed to be asking him what he was laughing at, but at this moment Mayer didn't want to explain anything, anyway. He was just an insignificant person, he just obeyed as the last member of Megda. It is enough to save these people, and the rest can be said to be unintentional. And I don't want to do these things, and it is even more unnecessary for me, instead of just some crazy people, it is better to wait for the next ending in this place. Chapter 1155, Accident. Just give everyone 10 minutes to think about it. I don't mean to force you, I just want you to see the true face of this village chief, who has been imprisoning you from the beginning, and why is it that you are not allowed to go out? Isn't it to hide his plans? I'm afraid that the fire that burned down the village was also set by him himself. At this time, the village chief was also trying to persuade all the people, hoping that they would not listen to what they liked, but after the first person stood up, the rest of the people followed and left in front of the village chief. It also made the village head stunned for a while, and did not expect things to change to this level. The reason for such a development is all because of the previous incident. If they hadn't colluded with Megda to do such a thing, there wouldn't have been so many problems, but sending Meyer out at the beginning was just. They carried their opinions behind their backs because there was a lot going on in the village at that time. In the event of a disaster, food has been drastically reduced at a speed visible to the naked eye. So I thought of this way, as long as people who go out will not come back, it can reduce a lot in at least two aspects. As expected, those people lasted until the second autumn, but the situation is not so optimistic. Every day, people report that the food on the other side has been reduced to another limit, which is not enough to support the remaining people to continue to live, but in fact they have to have some headaches, but there is no way, they have to their own villagers. To solve such a trouble as much as possible. Megda happened to appear at this time, proving that she had the ability to solve this matter, so she made this deal with that monster, and then sent a group of warriors to it as food and a tool for fun. Of course Megda is an exception. He went to find that Monster because he wanted to save people, and he didn't know it, so he had no choice but to have such a thing happen. But at the same time, the thing that made him puzzled was, this monster in fact, he let him go at first, but then he turned back on his own. The same time, this matter has become. I am not qualified to express any opinions, but at this moment, after seeing that all the villagers are basically walking towards him, Mayor bowed to the village chief. It can be regarded as thanks to him for taking care of these people for so many years. After all, he is still late. If I had said it earlier, I might have been able to Megda. After all, I heard these people say, it seems to be the last few years, but at that time, I should not have any awareness of this place. End point. I can't stand this bow. Knowing that if it wasn't for me back then, your father would not have fallen into that field. I admit that your father's death is indeed related to me. However, there is still a secret thing in it. If you stay in this environment for a while, you will find another culprit. I put this sentence here. Now my death is coming soon. These the villagers will ask you to protect them. After hearing this, Mayor was stunned for a moment. He didn't react at first, but Aruma, who was beside him, had already made a decision for himself. He gently grabbed Mayor's hand and stretched it out towards the village chief. This is also a final tribute to the predecessors. The village chief smiled with a gratified smile on his face. It was right to send this child out at the beginning. At least some of the education and ideas he came into contact with were different from those of the people here. They would only listen to themselves, and those who really have ideas have already been in control, because some of Megda's drugs are under control. Although it is true that the monster does not look good, and has no head, but in fact the other party's ability is supernatural, not to mention the usual things, just relying on the control of the mind, it can be said to be unparalleled. At the same time, Luffy and Blue Sakura's song has a result. At this time, Gong Yi's wound was healing at a fast speed, and even Luffy next to him was stunned for a moment. How could this be possible? But the happiest one was Bobo. I didn't expect this man to finally have some vitality, but in fact, the law of healing but the man has not yet woken up. No matter what Bobo and Lan Ying call his name, he has no response. Judging that he needs someone who can care about him to call his name, and then he will respond. At this time, everyone around is stunned. Who is the person who really cares about it? Could it be Meyer? Or focus on him? Who are you going to call? Or let's call Mayor back. Maybe he can solve this problem. After all this time Gong Yi has been protecting him from beginning to end, and he should be the only one who worries about him. Chapter 1156. Coma. After hearing this, Luffy nodded. This is a feasible plan. Besides, no one is fixed. It is always a good thing to try. Several people got up and planned to call people back from that place. At this time, Lan Ying and Bobo planned to protect Gong Yi in this place, and Luffy set off alone to the village to help call out those people, but in fact, what everyone did not expect was that the village chief disappeared like this in the air, and Mayor also heard footsteps from outside at this time. Since the village chief disappeared, he was most aware of every move in this place, as if they were part of his body. The village chief never explained this to himself, but it must be the magic thing. But Mayor didn't immediately. To a conclusion, he asked the Luma next to him to take these people to the inside of the village, and found that the lake surface was gradually swayed away, and a few people pointed to the bottom and said, this is the real place of their village. It turned out that as long as there were intruders, they could talk about that. The bottom of the lake watched their actions, judged whether they were good or bad, and then attacked and resisted. If that's the case, wouldn't there be any problems in your daily life? Wouldn't it be strange in a dark place? At this time, one of the villagers smiled bitterly, and the expression on his face made people feel that they could not be ignored. I didn't expect the people in this place to be slightly troubled. It seems that the village chief is indeed right. Actually, we can understand why the village chief acted like that, and he also wanted to prevent us from getting hurt. After all, there is such a monster that can change its head outside, and anyone who goes out may be replaced. But once we let that thing enter ours, Basically no one will be able to survive, so there is a reason for the village chief to let the people who went out not come in. When he heard this, Mayor suddenly realized, that's right, why didn't he think of this? His impression of the village chief is, he hurts people, and he won't let those people come back to this place to seek asylum, but never thought that if the headless corpse came back, it wouldn't be a war. The people in this place themselves survived after being reduced, and it can still be called such a pain. After a few people really dived into the water, Mayor smashed the walls on both sides, and they were all written with different characters, but they couldn't. You can see that you can read it. And at the first moment, they jumped into their minds and translated into a paragraph for their own reading. Mayor gently read the words on the wall in front of him, and the villagers couldn't help but feel strange, and did not expect to leave their hometown. After so many years, he still knows these words. But at the same time, Mayor also read a piece of information from it. It turns out that this place is really related to the inheritance between demons. Otherwise, how could this breath be transmitted to each other? This place is the origin of the demon's arrow. It turned out to be a formidable enemy in the village, until it was developed and discovered this devil's sword, but no one can hold this sword, but all the children's full moon seats are held in this place. Maybe it is want to see who has the ability to pick up these two pieces. On that night, Mayor was able to successfully pick up this sword. All the guests were stunned, even the village chief who participated in this exercise. You stayed in place, your mission is to find someone who can successfully pick up this sword. But now that he appeared, but he was just about to implement that policy, a few people sent the child out overnight, and by the way, he also brought the sword of the devil. It was Mayor who discovered his origin, and at the same time, Aruma couldn't recognize these words, and the more Mayor read, the more he stopped talking, so he didn't quite understand what happened next. What is it? But it's not difficult to see that such a fire was indeed deliberately done by someone, and at the same time everything stopped in this place. I don't know why, but I felt a little embarrassed anyway. Only herself is an outsider in this place. So Aruma just wants to hurry up and finish reading the words on the wall, and then leave this place, so that she can go back and have a look about Gong Yi, whether he has better. But at this time, a villager suddenly broke in outside, and a large number of people outside suddenly poured in from the side, and I didn't hear it clearly at first. But then they got divorced. After hearing the news, he stood at the door and welcomed a few people in. Who would have thought that it was Luffy and a few headless corpses who came? Then Mayor rushed forward and asked about the situation of Gong Yi. Chapter 1157, Secret Road. At this time, Luffy shook his head, indicating that the situation had not improved. After Aruma came up, he only saw his actions, and did not understand what the two were talking about, so he rushed forward, often thinking that the two were actually talking. Regarding Gong Yi's physical condition, I didn't expect that this time it would be a complete blow to Gong Yi. Although his wound is healing, his mind is in a coma. No matter who calls his name, it is of no use. That's why Luffy was ordered to come, hoping to let the two go back. You call his name, maybe, Gong Yi is able to be released from the coma. But at the same time, the villagers in this place cannot be abandoned. As the village chief said, as long as you go out, you can't come back, so this is what makes Mayor the most tangled, and Luffy doesn't say more directly. Go back to observe Gong Yi's situation first, and wait until the two of them make a decision before leaving. Aruma stopped Luffy on the spot and planned to leave with her. This village belongs to Mayor alone. He wants to guard this place. A few people will not say anything more. It is also very common for the team to fall apart. You can't force the other party to follow you. Think about it, after all, this belongs to your hometown. We are just outsiders. Go back and check Gong Yi's condition first. If there is no problem, we will not send you a logo on the locator. If the situation is urgent, you can come back immediately. After a few people left, Mayor was left alone to face the villagers. They said that the village chief could actually enter and leave the cave freely, but Mayor knew that he had not found the real inheritance yet. Must not be the real village head of this place. So he said that once he left, he really couldn't come back. A few people naturally didn't know this, but Mayer kept silent and ignored them and didn't pay attention to their concerns, so he walked straight down the cave. The words written on the wall are indeed true, the inheritance is in this place. But people need to understand that this place is full of texts that tell the history of the past, and has nothing to do with inheritance, so what is the connection that can lead to inheritance? After the dozen or so villagers glanced at each other, in this cave, only Meyer was left. Suddenly Meyer stepped on a small trap while walking on the ground, and a wall appeared on the wall. Inside is a treasure chest. There is a key in the treasure chest, but the shape of the key is very strange. It is a cross. If you guess correctly, it should be opened by abnormal means, but there is no cross around him, which made Meyer a little overwhelmed. At the same time, there was a sound of footsteps coming from the end, as if someone was approaching this way. Meyer quickly took the devil's sword and began to guard against that. Footsteps, but the brilliance of the devil's sword also disappeared at this time. Of the devil's sword, it should be able to exert its greatest brilliance in this place, but it seems to be different now. At least the devil seems to have lost its brilliance. Some are timid and don't know what's going on in front of them. But the footsteps always kept a certain distance, and he had to take a few steps back when he moved forward, as if he had a degree, and then spread to his side. All of this made Meyer not quite understand, but since it was one is that I always want to investigate, maybe I can find the starting point of the previous village chief, and I can crack the secret in it. So Meyer strode forward, but no matter how he walked, the voice was always close, still maintaining that distance, just at this moment. Meyer looked at the treasure box that popped up on the wall on the side, and found that the thing was still there. Just now, the place hadn't moved at all, and he didn't expect that he had been spinning in place all the time. Does that prove that he encountered a ghost hitting the wall? I don't know of any other explanation. After all, this matter is really beyond my expectations. I just want to crack this thing quickly, and then go back to find Gong Yi. I don't know what the situation is on his side. I know that I can only do it when the situation is critical at that time. To make such a judgment and leave a few of them there is also an unbearable thing for me. But I can't take their lives to make a deal in this place. If the village chief hadn't given a word of consolation back then, he might still be obsessed with staring at that place. This is what makes me feel the most chilling. Is anyone there? After hearing this, footsteps stopped for a few steps, and did not respond continuously, as if it had been frozen. Chapter 1158, Footsteps. This kind of reaction surprised Meyer for a while. Can he recognize his own voice? But at this time, there was no time for him to hesitate, so Meyer had to stride forward, and the villagers behind him also followed suit. They stayed where they were stationed, and did not go further into the cave. After all, one of their bosses said that only the true inheritors can enter that place, and they are just adding to the chaos. So a few people, calm down and wait outside, wait for him to come out and see how the situation is before making a conclusion, but also, some other things happen because of this. That place can only be entered by destined people, and a villager does not carefully stumbled into it. It was the footsteps that Meyer heard before, but the two were approaching each other like this, and Melina didn't dare to make a big fight at this time, for fear of being discovered by the person on the other end, but it was not until Meyer made a sound that Melina didn't dare. Realizing that this person is not the new village chief who just took office, he held the devil's sword in his hand and kept a certain distance from him. Since the other party dared to come to him, he must be well informed. I can't stop him from approaching, but I can come again, and arrest him at a very close moment. After all, it seems that things have never been kind to me now, but giving up at this time is the most despicable thing. Village Chief, I'm Melina, a villager outside. I've come to see you this time for something. After hearing this, Meyer put away the devil's sword and slowly walked towards the figure. When he saw it clearly, he found that it was indeed the little-known boy from Melina. Every time he bows his head in the crowd, he rarely sees the expression he raises his head. I have to say that he is really a very handsome boy, but at the same time, is there any problem with him coming to him? This place only has fate. Talent, it was only by accident that I was able to run in. Something happened outside. It seemed that a huge monster broke in. It devoured several villagers in that Fangjing and scolded us, and was hiding in an air raid shelter next to it. Now, the person in charge wants you to go out and help solve it quickly. After hearing this, Mayer's face couldn't help but harden. Could it be that Megda was released? How could the monster appear again? Luffy and Gong Yi and the others have not already solved it. At this time, Mayer suddenly I remembered Luffy and Uruhu had just left. Could it be that the two of them were also caught, so they left the cave and ran out without looking back? When he got to the door, Melina finally caught up, grabbed him, and held her tightly. She didn't know what to say, but at this time, Mayer looked at her, as if to signal that if he had any problems, he would say it quickly. Be careful, you said that our only hope is now. The village chief and the previous village chief have already left, but you are the only one who has just taken up the position. We also need a backbone, so trouble must come back alive. Meyer naturally agreed unambiguously to this point. Could it be that he can still die in this place and there are so many things he hasn't done, but he can't be stopped here because of this little thing, and at the same time when he went out, he found that it was indeed Megda. The scars on his body were still there, but he was able to stand up, which really made him not consider it, but seeing two things beside him, if he guessed correctly, it should be Luffy and Aruma, but when he turned around, he found that it was his two villagers, and it seemed that those two people were quite alert and fled the place. But at the same time, the anger in Meyer's heart was suddenly ignited. This may be the sense of responsibility inherited from his father. After seeing the villagers being bullied, Meyer's first thought was to avenge them, but this man was still hanging around this place with Megda's face on. I really didn't expect you to be able to get up from that place alive after being hit like that last time. We should have cut the grass and roots, cut off your head directly, and disassembled your body into several halves. At this time, Megda suddenly raised her head and laughed, as if she heard something extremely funny, and then turned to look at Meyer who was on the side. Do you think you can kill me? The reason why I have lived in that place for so long and never been killed is because I can be reborn and combine any part of my body freely. This is the beginning of my ability. Chapter 1159. Question 3rd. After hearing this, Mayer's face turned pale. Then, no matter what kind of action he takes, he should not die. In this case, things will be a lot more difficult, but at this moment the villagers who lived there also saw themselves in the air raid shelter, which was a storage room-like place on the ground. There is a row of fences above. That place is ventilated. You can choose to block it or choose to open it. At this time, they should open that row to see how they fight this person. The same time, Megda was also unambiguous, and directly threw the villagers in her hands to the ground and walked towards her with big strides. I really didn't expect you to have such an ability. I seem to understand why Luffy never does anything to you. Megda's face was full of complacency, and Mayer glanced at Melina who had just run into the cave. If it could be solved this time, it would not be a loss. But how to make Melina obey his orders? This place has the potential to be the ruler. At least his strength is much stronger than that of ordinary people, and there are many people who need to be protected in this place. Mayer also didn't want to make the family affairs too big, but at this time, Megda actually hit his idea of the Devil's Sword and wanted to take the Devil's Sword from his own hands. At this moment, Lu Hui's heart burst out with a touch of anger, and quickly put the sword on Megda's neck. Everyone around was stunned, even Melina, who wanted to escape, was in a trance at this time. How is it that you have already been surrendered by me? If you still want to get out of this place alive today, then you honestly don't move anything, and I will let you go after I go to that place to apologize. After hearing this sentence, Megda laughed out loud, and she would not apologize to anyone. The younger generation apologized. Obviously they cut into their own territory first. If they didn't appear on this small island, if so, he wouldn't have fallen to such a level. At first, I thought that they had any contact with me, but it was not until later that I found out that things were not so simple, and it was not difficult to see that they also approached themselves in a targeted manner, and finally polluted their environment into a mess. Temperament, but something that made him forget. And Tino, who developed such a potion, which can turn all fertile land into a desert, and even instructed Luffy to do such a thing. Turned into a ruin. I really did not expect that with the heart of a villain, the belly of Kun's son, such a person really exists. But at the same time, the thing that he couldn't understand is, why did Megda in front of him do all this for this sake? Did he have any difficulties or just for fun? Why don't you ask them? What kind of restrictions did the village chief put on me at the time? They came here to interfere with my life. I originally wanted to leave this place directly, never again. If I appear here, maybe I can save my life. What about? I often think that a few people actually surrounded me at the gate and refused to let me leave. In the end, the village chief even set up a ban with his blood. As long as I leave this island, I will never be born again. Why Megda is playing with the people in this place even harder? Yes, but it can't be put on Megda. After all, he hurt Gongyi before. There must be a settlement for this matter. How to explain one thing about Gongyi? Her face is very similar to a person. I believe you should be able to notice it after you have listed so many places. The expressions on the faces of everyone who sees Gongyi are very strange, which should be similar to his. It's not convenient for me to say more about the previous family. You can just ask him if you have any questions. After listening to this, Mayer looked at the man in front of him, wondering what value it had in existence. At this time, Megda's face had an expression similar to fear, and Mayer gave birth to this expression because of his face. With sympathy, he wanted to let it go out of here, but Melina behind him suddenly spoke up, loudly accusing Mayer of what he had done. How can you let it go? Forget those who tragically died. Chapter 1160. At that time, Mayer's eyes suddenly became sharp, and then he turned back quickly. He didn't expect that the last person to speak was actually him. When he went in and met news about himself, Mayer thought he was a good boy. Was not polluted by the actions of the village chiefs, but now it seems that it is not the case. They have probably colluded with each other, right? Today's illness also makes them remember for a long time, who is the new owner of this place. It has been recognized by part of the inheritance, if it is a coincidence that Xiaotang can appear there. Now Mayer can already think clearly. He just wants to prevent himself from getting that inheritance. After all, she still has a chance to compete for the position of the village head, which is something that people in this place never imagined. To be so sinister. That's why I don't know what news you have when you go to the cave to find me. I already know the movement of this place. The reason why I put Megda in this place is to have a look. What method can you use to solve it? Who would think that you actually called me out? It turns out that they don't blame themselves for not being affectionate. After all, they will use themselves as a shield when they are in danger. Is this what Mayer wants to see? Saying these words so directly reveals their purpose directly. Yuhi's face was also blue and green, and at this moment Megda suddenly told a secret. It turned out that he was the guardian of this place. When he heard him say that the island was connected to it, Mayer had already realized this. These people should be foreign intruders. The real owner of the island was held hostage in front of him. Megda with a wry smile, he seemed to think of the atmosphere and situation when these people just arrived on the island. You have to know that Magda is a good person. Your father is really a very responsible person. Because his father was the mayor of the village at that time, he said that he made a plan directly. A mountain is raised to the ground for all to focus on. But Megda let him change his mind without hesitation, and the reason why I made my specimen of the place that remained was because he told me that there was one thing he could not stop himself. If I came out with this face, they might have thought that the heaven had come, so they might have made some other changes, but as expected, the village was burnt down. This is why they will appear in such an environment in the future. No wonder the village chief looked at him and smiled before he died, as if Nian was finally relieved, but at this time, Melina was a little confused what to do. Suddenly, I was numb, and then I watched the two people start to reminisce, but why did I hear a fact that was completely inconsistent with the legend I heard? So at this time, Melina shouted at Megda above. It's obvious that what you said is a lie, and everyone here is saying that if the village chief hadn't burned down the village, you would have found us in our place and eaten us all. Is it too much for you to pretend to be innocent like this? There are some things that have to be traced back to the bottom, and if we hadn't run fast, I'm afraid you would have made those. After hearing this, Megda smiled and looked at Mayer in front of him. At this time, it was not a question of who said right or wrong, but who he believed would use this method to verify it. Everyone was caught off guard, and Mayer also saw some expressions on Megda's face, and what she said was definitely not wrong. I just saw the words left by the village chief on the wall. The burning of this village was not to avoid the pursuit of the headless corpse, but because of a decision made by Megda. After all, he was the village chief at that time. There are some things that must be done according to his ideas, otherwise, when something goes wrong, these ordinary people can only bear it. What Melina said could be another version, but the headless corpse never seemed to be malicious, and he only caught those who were left alone, which means that he would not take the initiative to attack this people in the environment. You don't have to fight in this place. There is a real answer on the wall below. Since all thieves can enter, presumably Megda should also be able to put on this face and want to enter the holy place of this village, presumably not either. What a difficult thing. As for the position of the village chief you want, I will make a decision after a while, and if I find out before that, I will kill you.